We've talked a lot this week about the possible threat of 5G wireless networks across America and the danger that they pose to the public, both vaccinated and unvaccinated. We've spoken with Germany's Dr. Rainer Fulmich on this show before about his attempt to create a second Nuremberg tribunal for holding vaccine pushers accountable. We support that 100%. But Dr. Fulmich also has thoughts on this 5G threat. Specifically, he believes that COVID was either faked from the beginning, yes, or massively exaggerated, yeah, and used all as a tool to mass vaccinate the planet and get them hooked up to the new 5G grid. So is 5G actually a greater threat than the vaccine bioweapon itself? We want to learn more about that. Of course, to that end, Dr. Fulmich joins us now. Thank you, sir, for being here. We really appreciate it.
I'm really happy to be back. Thank you very much for having me. Well, I certainly do believe, but it's not based on a bad dream or something. This is based on one of the most important interviews that I have ever done. I certainly do believe that 5G, microwaves in general, microwave radiation in general, are a far greater threat than the so-called vaccines because it affects everyone, not just those who got the shots. And this is based on two interviews that I did with two of the most interesting interviews I've ever done. The only way to do it is in person, because the man who I interviewed in England doesn't believe in microwave radiation. He is the foremost authority on microwave radiation and 5G. So he won't join any Zoom call or anything because he just doesn't have Wi-Fi. He doesn't use it because he believes it's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. The man's name is Barry Trower. Microwave radiation has been a weapon since the 1930s. The Soviet Union has been using it on American people, on others as well, since 1949, if I'm not completely mistaken. But the American government has also been using it on the American people, as shown by a speech that President Kennedy gave in 1963, 10 days before he was assassinated. He spoke about exposing the military's involvement in radiation, in microwave radiation, using it as a weapon against your own people. We've gotten used to using microwave ovens. It looks and sounds as though this is a good thing because this is how you make your dinner sometimes. But in reality, they only did this in order to get us accustomed to microwave radiation and to make us believe that it's really good. But it is a weapon. It can be used to cause almost any symptoms of any disease. You can kill people. In fact, Barry Trower believes that those first pictures that we saw from Wuhan, when people simply keeled over, wasn't caused by their death wasn't caused by any virus, but rather it was caused by 5G. They've been experimenting with this since the 1970s. And it has been used for geoengineering. And that's why I believe, my team believes that 5G, microwave radiation in general, he points that out continuously. It's not just 5G, it's 3G, 4G, is extremely dangerous.
Yeah, we want to touch on something that you just said about the propaganda videos that were pushed out by the Chinese of people just, keeling over, suddenly dropping dead, dying suddenly from this so-called coronavirus. We want to make it very clear, it's our position that nobody ever across the entire face of the planet died from a novel respiratory virus, SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19. We believe that was all fake. And that this is, infection by injection, that this was a bioweapon intentionally deployed on the masses, and that these people are criminals of humanity, that they are war criminals, and that they should be treated accordingly. Is that something, by the way, do you agree with that, Dr. Fulmich?
Yes, I do agree with that. I wouldn't, 3 years ago, I would have said, hey, come on, take your pills, you'll be fine. But in the meantime, after having spoken to, more than 450 expert witnesses from all walks of science, that is the conclusion that I and my team have come to. Yeah, absolutely. But, this is not, you speak with Dr. Mike Yeadon, for example, you've spoken with Judy Mikovits and all the others.
Plenty of times, yeah.
They all agree on this. Mike actually says, he's a really good friend of mine. He actually says, I have changed my view on vaccinations. And Professor Sushrit Bhakti says, I think I've been teaching the wrong thing for the last 30 years.
Yeah, some doctors, very high profile, very qualified doctors and experts and scientists and researchers and analysts are actually changing their views on viruses as a whole.
I'm a German doctor who's been practicing medicine in Seattle for a long time, and he told me that Dietrich Klinghardt is his name, and he told me that he was treating people from the military and from the intelligence services in July or August of 2019 who had symptoms that he later was able to verify as being typical COVID symptoms. So that it looks as though the virus, if it is a virus, we don't even know if it's a virus, because you can create these symptoms by using microwave radiation. So if you want to communicate safely without any of the side effects or intended effects, we should go back to fiber optics. It's much safer. Take down these towers. There's an example. He spoke about an example. He visited one of the kings in Africa who was very much aware, educated in England, I think, very much aware of the dangers of 5G. And he showed him a field which was almost dead. There was no bugs, nothing going around. He said, I believe this is because of 5G. And Barry was able to confirm that that's the case. They took down the 5G towers and everything went back to normal.
Remember all of the cows that just dropped dead? They blamed it on a heat wave. Could this be attributed to the 5G networks?
He absolutely said so. Yes. He said, if you were to give me or anyone who knows a little bit about microwave radiation and 5G, a little bit of money, I could destroy any country within a year or less than a year, because I can destroy the crops, I can kill the animals. This is geoengineering on a huge scale. And they're trying to cover it up by blaming global warming or climate change or whatever for it. Yeah. But it's really geoengineered weather.
Yeah. I think they all need to come down. And mind you, by the way, let me just remind the viewing and listening audience, all of these towers, all of this infrastructure was erected while we were all locked down.
Yes.
And none of this was heavily advertised. Nobody asked for your permission. They just introduced it as this brand new convenience that was going to make your cell phone so much better, so much greater, so much faster. It doesn't even actually really do that. It's not a convenience. It's a weapon of war, much like Starlink that was also there for a convenience.
Now, I have 10 minutes. I wasn't sure I was going to get to this stage, but I can't help but say something about this whole coronavirus thing, if you want me to. Yes. So, again, when you know Steiner, you have the answers to the test, but you have to then figure out the details. In 1918, after the biggest pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, Steiner was asked, what was this all about? And he said, well, viruses are simply excretions of a toxic cell. Viruses are pieces of DNA or RNA with a few other proteins. They bud out from the cell. They happen when the cell is poisoned. They are not the cause of anything. And the first way I would encourage you to think about this is if you are a famous dolphin doctor, right? And you have been studying dolphins in the Arctic Circle for hundreds of years, or at least a long time, and the dolphins were fine. And then they call you up, Fred, all the dolphins, or a lot of the dolphins, are dying in the Arctic Circle. Can you come and investigate? Right? And you have one question to ask. So, show of hands. How many of you would say, I want to investigate a dolphin to see the genetic makeup of that dolphin? Nobody, because that's stupid. How many of you would say, I want to see if this dolphin and that dolphin has a virus because it might be contagious and that's why all these dolphins are getting sick? That fellow. How many of you would say, excuse my French here, did somebody put some shit in the water here? Like Exxon Valdez? Anybody? Everybody. Because that's what happened. And the cells get poisoned. They try to purify themselves by excreting debris, which we call viruses. If you go to the current theory of viruses called exosomes, and the latest head of the NIH giving a talk on the complexity of viruses, you will see this is perfectly in line with the current thinking on what a virus really is. I had a dramatic example of this when I was growing up. Right outside our house, there was a wetlands, and they were full of frogs, and the frogs kept me up at night, so I taped the windows, and they were, in the spring, they made a big racket. And then over time, the frogs were all gone. How many thinks the frogs had a genetic disease? How many thinks the frogs had a virus? How many thinks somebody put DDT into the water? That's what happened. Diseases are poisoning. It's one of the reasons why vaccines, so let me skip that for a minute. So what happened in 1918? There was a huge, in every pandemic in the last 150 years, there was a quantum leap in the electrification of the Earth. In 1918, late fall of 1917, there was the introduction of radio waves around the world. Whenever you expose any biological system to a new electromagnetic field, you poison it, you kill some, and the rest go into a kind of suspended animation so that, interestingly, they live a little bit longer and sicker. And then starts in World War II with the next pandemic with the introduction of radar equipment all over the Earth, blanketing the entire Earth in radar fields. First time humans have ever been exposed to that. In 1968, there was the Hong Kong flu, and it was the first time the Earth has a protective layer in the Van Allen belt, which essentially integrates the cosmic fields from the sun and the Earth, from the moon and Jupiter, etc., integrates that and essentially distributes that to the living beings of the Earth. And we put satellites emitting radioactive frequencies in the Van Allen belt. Within 6 months, we had a new viral pandemic. Why viral? Because the people are poisoned, they excrete toxins, they look like viruses. People think it's a flu epidemic. In the 1918 epidemic, the Boston Health Department decided to investigate the contagiousness of this. So they, believe it or not, took hundreds of people with the flu and they sucked the snot out of their nose and injected it into the healthy people who didn't have the flu, and not one time could they make the next person sick. They did this over and over again, and they were not able to demonstrate contagion. They even did it with horses who apparently got the Spanish flu, and they put bags over their head, and the horses sneezed in the bag, and they put the bag over the next horse, and not one horse got sick. You can read about this in a book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, who chronicles all the steps in the electrification of the Earth and how within 6 months there was a new flu pandemic all over the world. And when you hear the normal explanations, how did it go from Kansas to South Africa in 2 weeks? So the entire world got the symptoms at the same time, in spite of the fact that the mode of transportation was horseback and boats, and there's no explanation for it. They just say, we don't know how that happened. But when you think about it, with these radio waves and other frequencies that some of you have in your pocket and on your wrist, you can send a signal to Japan and it arrives instantaneously. So any of you who don't believe there is an electromagnetic field that communicates globally within seconds just is not paying attention to this. And I will only finish by pointing out that there has been a dramatic and quantum leap in the last 6 months with the electrification of the Earth. And I'm sure a lot of you know what that is. It's called 5G, where they now have 20,000 radiation-emitting satellites, just like the radiation-emitting thing in your pocket and on your wrist and that you use all the time. That is not compatible with health. I'm sorry to say it, it's not compatible with health. That is a water destructuring device. And for any of you who say, yeah, well, we're not electrical beings, we're just physical matter, then don't bother doing an EKG or an EEG or a nerve conduction test, because we are electrical beings and the chemicals are only the byproduct of those electrical impulses. And I'll finish with, anybody want to make one guess as to where the first completely blanketed 5G city in the world was? Exactly. So when you start thinking about this, we are in an existential crisis here, folks, the likes of which humankind has never seen. And I don't want to go all Old Testament prophet on you, but this is something that is unprecedented. The putting of 100,000 satellites in the very blanket of the Earth. And by the way, as I was going to say earlier, this actually has something to do with the vaccine question. And this got brought home to me because about a year ago or so, I had a patient who came in who was totally fine, a surfer and all, and then he works as an electrician putting in Wi-Fi systems for very wealthy people. Electricians have a very high mortality rate, but he was fine. And then he breaks his arm and he gets a metal plate put in his arm. 3 months later, he couldn't get out of bed and was total, heart irregularities, just total collapse. The susceptibility has to do with how much metal you have in your body, as well as the quality of the water in your cells. So if you start injecting aluminum in people, they become receptors for absorbing increased electromagnetic fields, and that is a perfect storm for the kind of deterioration of the species, which is what we're now experiencing. And I'm just going to finish with one more thing, which I like to, is a quote from Rudolf Steiner. And by the way, this was around 1917, so it was a different time. In times when there were no electrical currents, when the air was not swarming with electrical influences, we're talking 1917, it was easier to be human. For this reason, in order to be human at all today, it is necessary to expend much stronger spiritual capacities than was necessary a century ago. So I'll just leave you with whatever you can do to increase your spiritual capacities, because it's really damn hard to be a human being these days. So thanks for listening.
Let's get started. The David Icke London Real interview. Who watched it? Probably not a lot of you guys, right? You know why you haven't watched it? Because it was banned worldwide. Every time it got uploaded to YouTube, they pulled it down. I chased it to BitChute, Facebook. I couldn't even get it to load at those places. I finally caught the new David Icke interview on London Real's website, which they're also having issues with the servers due to overwhelming demand. Now, in this interview, David Icke links 5G to the coronavirus pandemic. And because of that, the video's been banned worldwide. YouTube and Google actually changed their policies. They went from not recommending conspiracy theory content to just deleting videos and issuing strikes if you put out any information linking 5G to the coronavirus. So whether you agree with David Icke or not, you need to go watch the interview just to show your support for free speech. Because these tech giants have been incrementally making topics off limit so that they can't be talked about. That's scary. Go watch the interview for the simple fact that it's been banned worldwide. LondonReal.com, I think, is their website. Now, next, at least 20 5G towers have been destroyed or vandalized in the UK. And that's why I gave you the disclaimer at the beginning of this video. Now, in the article, they're going to call them phone masts, but they're 5G towers because I've seen the footage of them burning, okay? At least 20 UK phone masts vandalized over false 5G coronavirus claims. The article goes on to say 20 mobile phone masts across the UK. Keep in mind they're talking about 5G towers. Are believed to have been torched or otherwise vandalized since Thursday, according to government and industry sources who are increasingly concerned about the impact of baseless theories linking coronavirus to 5G networks. Now, they called those baseless theories. Do you want to know why they're baseless theories? Because there have been no studies conducted on what the effects of 5G do to the human body. And the reason these studies haven't been conducted is because they already know what 5G does to the human body. And if they publish it, if we find out about the negative effects of the millimeter waves, guess what? They're not going to be allowed to put them up worldwide. Everybody would know they were weapons or could be used as weapons. Do you understand? Changing the frequency of the planet and your city and your neighborhood, it affects the human body negatively, okay? So do your own research. I just want to say, wow, they've taken down 20 5G towers in the UK. Now, I'm not insinuating you should do that here. I don't want you to break the law. You know what I mean? I don't think you should do anything illegal. Next, footage today from RT shows a 5G tower burning in the UK. And here's a little snippet of it. Wow. They're not going for it. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that the weekend yellow vest protests are still going on. I think they're breaking the lockdown rules every weekend, and those yellow vests are still protesting. Impressive. Next thing I want to talk about. States are now mandating quarantines, setting up checkpoints to limit cross-state COVID-19 infections. At these checkpoints, you'll be checked for symptoms of COVID-19. You'll have your temperature taken. And if you're showing symptoms or you got a fever, you'll be barred from traveling from one state to the next. That's FEMA and the National Guard. That should scare you immensely. You can't even travel from state to state right now without having your temperature checked, without having papers explaining why you're going from one state to another. Things aren't going back to normal. Matter of fact, they came out today and said kids probably won't be going back to school until the fall. I wouldn't expect it ever, you guys. I wouldn't expect it ever. We have now entered a new territory where our freedom is just demolished and obliterated. And nobody did anything. Also, I spoke about this last week. When China first lifted their quarantine, Wuhan residents tried to travel from one province to the next. They weren't allowed to either. They weren't allowed to cross province lines. They destroyed a police car in a violent protest, which is actually very strange for China because over there, when you break the law like that, they snatch you up, throw you in a concentration camp. So I just wanted to come back and touch on that for a moment. Now, I said I was going to tell you why they haven't shut the internet down. I think some of you guys, you probably know the answer already. They're using the internet right now and the news to beam propaganda directly into your home, into your mind, into your ears, your eyes, into your children's ears and eyes. They're ruling you with this technology. This technology is the enemy. You understand? They're using the internet, the news, the media, the radio, everything to spread propaganda, to keep you living in fear. And also, if they shut off the internet, a lot of people might wake up. A lot of Americans will get really bored really quick. That's why they've kept the internet on. Keep everybody busy, distracted, play your video games, go to your dating apps, you know what I mean, FaceTime, get on Facebook, give all your information away for free, let them sell it. The internet's on to keep the people passive while these new control measures are put on our country. And plus, if they shut the internet off, they can't beam the propaganda directly to your brain anymore.